I want to share with you another really cool kind of visualization tool that we weren't able to cover in class, and something that you certainly could be able to use on most of your websites. For this week's assignment, you don't really want to use this necessarily, but you certainly want to be aware of it as you kind of develop forward. Plus, it's just a great primary source tool for students and visitors and things like that. Basically, it's the historical census browser. If you go to Google and you just Google historical census data browser, if you look up here in the top right of my screen, that's all I did in my Google box is enter that in, and it was able to take me to this. And what it is, it's a creation of the University of Virginia Library, the historical census browser. And basically what it is, it compiles the aggregate census data for the United States Census from 1790 through 1960. Every 10 years, the United States government conducts a federal census. At that time, they do a manuscript census, and then once that census is completed, the United States then compiles all of the data it gains from those individual household and individual businesses, and compiles an aggregate data. I mean, what you're really seeing here is the aggregate of everything that you see on, say, like Ancestry. When you go on Ancestry.com, it has individual households and individuals listed on the census and the manuscript portion of it. What you're seeing here in historic census browsers, if you take all that information and compile it, that's what you get. But the really cool thing about the census browser is not only does it give you a lot of different data to work with, it gives you things like the total population, slave population, gives you senses of religion in different areas, race, ethnicity, the type of manufacturing and employment that's available in certain areas. There's a lot of kind of cool things you can do with it. But even better, it generates maps for you, and that's the best part of it. It generates some really cool color-coded maps that help people interpret this data, or at least see it spatially, across a national kind of scale. So I want to quickly kind of show you, how you do this. It's really, really easy. And the best thing about the maps too is you can save them as JPEGs and then post them back on your website. So let's say here I want to study slave populations. So down here it gives me a category. Choose a category to begin. Choose a category to begin examining data. Choose the slave population here. I want slave population statistics from 1790, which honestly the federal government didn't even track it back then, but from 1790, let's say through 1860. There's no point beyond that. You highlight what you want. I want total slaves. I could just do female or male, but I want all the slaves. And you hit submit query, and boom, it gives me a list of all the different states and what their data was. And for states that didn't exist at the time, it's just not even in here. But it's really cool. If you look at this, it gives you Alabama. So in Alabama, well, heck, why am I talking about Alabama? Let's talk about Georgia. Down here, here's Georgia. I can highlight Georgia. They compiled census data for Georgia slaves even as far back as 1790. So in 1790, Georgia had 29,000 slaves. By the end of the antebellum period, they had 462,000 slaves. I mean, quite an increase of that. If I want to see how Georgia is compared to the rest of the country, all I have to do is hit this little map it button. So let's say in 1860, I'm curious, how does Georgia's 462,000 slaves rank to other states? So I hit this map it button, and it generates a map for me. And the map is really cool. It's a color-coded map. And the darker it is on here, the more slaves that are in the area. You see over here in the right corner, they had this little classification legend. That's the light green is anywhere from 2 to 122,000. The dark green, where Georgia is over 368,000 basically. So you get a sense, and it really helps students analyze this map, or let the public think about the consequences of this map. Was the Civil War an issue of slavery? And one way this map certainly helps us understand that. And another way, though, it certainly provides us room to question some of that, because if you look at the map carefully, I mean, you see Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, Delaware. There's some slaves even in New Jersey at the time. Not very many, but certainly some slaves there. And none of those states seceded from the Union. I mean, they remained during the Civil War, so it certainly complicates things. These maps are very customizable too. Let's say if I want to relate things, like I want to have waterways in here, you just click this little waterways button up here and hit refresh map, and boom, it'll give you the major waterways. There's the Chattahoochee River, there's the Tennessee River, and the Ohio, and the Mississippi, and all so forth and so on. So a good thing about this too, if you're just looking for a quick way to create a map other than stealing one off of Google or something like that. This is a real easy way to do it. Now, the cool thing is, once I've done this, I can then save it. All I got to do is go to the map, right-click on it, hit Save Image As, and I can save this map, basically. It'll save it as a GIF image, which is fine. You'll definitely be able to use that GIF image later on. But I just save it, and then I can post that to my website later on. Now, when you post it to the website, it won't have this little legend on here, so you probably need to write this data down, and you'll need to be able to create that on your own on your website. Have some kind of note telling people, how to kind of interpret this. So that's one thing you can do with this. Another thing I want to show you that you can do with historic census browsers, particularly important. Like I was talking in class the other day, one of the values of visualizations is to express data both spatially and multidimensionally and all this kind of stuff. But you can also look at it, that map showed you from a national scale. Well, what about within the state of Georgia itself? How does it look within the state of Georgia? How did slavery look? Basically, all you have to do is you click on Georgia. You can click on any state, but just click on Georgia. You scroll down to the bottom here, and it says Retrieve County Level Data. So I'll do that. I want to find out in Georgia counties what slavery looked like, and it gives you a list of Georgia counties. Georgia has an enormous amount of counties, at least compared to its size. And I can do the same thing for Georgia that I did for the nation. Let's map it in 1860. Yes, slavery was. There were thousands of slaves in Georgia, hundreds of thousands of slaves, but where did they live in Georgia? And it gives you very quickly a map that can tell you that. Look on this legend here. You can see there are portions of Georgia that are either sparsely settled by whites, which this area down here in the south was definitely settled, or areas where slavery just was not, as popular. I'm causing the map to move on me as I do this, but let me recenter this thing. Oh, whoops. Come on. There we go. Come on back to me. It's moving around on me. Okay. But anyway, you can kind of see a sense here. And you can see, again, the darker areas, and that also can lead to great issues. As we all know, in the history of Georgia, at least, secession was far from, actually, the first secession vote failed. And secession was far from a consensus kind of issue in Georgia. I mean, there were a lot of disagreements about things. And part of that is because of the diversity of, or the great variation in the slave populations in the area. And there were certainly sections of Georgia. If you want students to do something like, identify the black belt in Georgia, well, this map right here pretty much does it. You see these dark green areas in the center. That is the black belt in Georgia. And look at slavery outside of the black belt. I mean, outside of the black belt, you have some counties up here. This is Floyd and Bartow County, where you definitely have slavery. Cobb County and so forth, and some others. But the bulk of slaves in Georgia live within a radius that centers on Macon, goes up to the north in Augusta, and goes further south to Columbus. Basically the fall line in Georgia. And again, just like anything else, you can also put waterways on here. I'll hit the refresh. You can add current U.S. cities, just so people get a sense of where things are. Again, it doesn't label them, but again, the big stars obviously Atlanta, Macon, Albany, so forth and so on. They don't put Columbus on here, but it doesn't matter that much. But you go on here, and again, you can right click, save the image, and you can then manipulate it from there. This is a great quick tool to create maps. It's also a great kind of exploration device for students. I mean, you can create assignments where students get to play and build their own maps and interpret the maps that they've built for other audiences and so forth. So this is a historic census data browser. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of see it. I definitely think for almost every project in this class, there's certainly something you can gain from this. If you go on the web too, you'll find there are maps similar to this for elections, historic elections. If you're dealing with presidents or more national trends, something like that. There's a variety of these kind of mapping resources, but this is one of the best ones. Just quick, easy to use. Plus, I mean, you should be able to use this stuff in your own. A lot of you are writing research papers and writing master's theses and so forth. This is a quick way to kind of get at some data, some mass info. So, all right, I hope y'all have a great day, and